In July of 1518, a woman named Frau Trophäa stepped onto the cobblestones of a public street and began to dance. She moved without music, twisting and shaking to a rhythm only she could hear. She lived in Strasbourg, a densely populated free city of the Holy Roman Empire, where hundreds of people watched her from their windows in silence. Trophäa danced for a full week, ignoring the pain in her muscles and bloodied feet, twirling relentlessly until she collapsed from sheer exhaustion, only to wake up and start again. Within days, over 30 people joined her in the street. By the end of the month, the number of participants had swelled to 400. This was no celebration. It was an agonizing epidemic, leaving victims thrashing with spasms, their eyes vacant, trapped in bodies they could no longer control. Desperate for a solution, the city council consulted local physicians, who provided a flawed diagnosis. The dancers were suffering from hot blood, an internal imbalance of the humors. Their intervention was a catastrophe. Based on the hot blood theory, the council prescribed even more dancing to help victims burn the sickness out of their systems. The city actually built wooden stages and marked out dance zones, even hiring professional musicians to play loud pipes and drums to keep the rhythmic motion going. The music only served to sustain the trance. Dancers began to drop from heat stroke and exhaustion. At the peak of the frenzy, up to 15 people a day were dying from strokes and heart failure. By treating a psychological compulsion as a physical fever, Strasbourg officials accidentally turned a single woman's breakdown into a mass casualty event. To solve this mystery, we have to look past the medieval superstition and put 16th century Strasbourg on the autopsy table to test the biological suspects. Researchers point to Sydenham's chorea, but that condition typically causes brief, erratic twitches in children. The Strasbourg crowd were adults with the sustained aerobic power to dance for weeks. The leading chemical suspect is ergotism, a toxic fungus growing on damp rye. It contains LSD-like alkaloids, causing hallucinations and convulsions. However, the physiological reality of ergotism makes it a poor fit. The toxin constricts blood flow to the limbs, often leading to gangrene. It would be physically impossible for a person poisoned by ergot to maintain a vigorous aerobic dance for days on end. Physical toxins and pathogens fail to explain the unique combination of aerobic stamina and the specific demographics seen in the 1518 records. The investigation must turn to cultural evidence. At the time, Strasbourg was gripped by the fear of Saint Vitus, a figure believed to have the power to curse sinners with an uncontrollable dancing plague. This fear dictated the city's eventual response. They banned music and forced the victims into a pilgrimage to a mountaintop shrine, where they were made to wear red shoes and carry crosses to beg for absolution. Historian John Waller identifies the true cause as mass psychogenic illness. In this diagnosis, the contagion lived within the shared fears and crushing traumas of the community. The environment leading up to 1518 was a pressure cooker of misery. Strasbourg endured 3 consecutive years of severe famine, harsh winters, and a terrifying outbreak of syphilis. When crippling new taxes were added, the population reached a psychological snapping point. The relentless movement on the streets was the physical evidence of a society pushed past the absolute limits of human endurance. Under conditions of extreme trauma, the human brain can trigger a dissociative trance, a state where the mind effectively severs its connection to physical reality to cope with an unbearable environment. Because the people of Strasbourg shared a specific cultural terror of Saint Vitus, their overwhelmed minds adopted that narrative, causing them to lose control of their limbs as they disconnected from their surroundings. This psychological loop also explains why the religious pilgrimage finally stopped the dancing in September. If the disease is generated by a collective belief in a curse, it can only be cured by an equally powerful belief that the curse has been lifted. The dancers were governed by a shared narrative that became powerful enough to override their physical limits and their own pain receptors. The 1518 dancing plague is more than a bizarre historical quirk. It is a profound testament to the power of the mind-body connection. Modern populations remain vulnerable to psychogenic illness. When we are placed under extreme, inescapable stress without a systemic outlet, that pressure has to find a way out. When human trauma has no logical release, the mind will eventually invent a physical one, regardless of how devastating it may be.